Welcome to Critical Conversations with the Compass Foundation. I am Chris Hussain.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Narmada Ramjit Singh.
Hi, everyone. I am Shanta Sipasad.
Well, of course, you all know we have a critical conversation about almost everything. And so today we're going to be continuing our conversation from last week. And in our second segment, we have attorney at law Kyle Taklal Singh, who will be discussing the legal parameters behind this sort of sedition law ruling and what it means for Trinidad and Tobago. But guys, let's get into some of the hot topics for this week. As you all know and would have seen in the news, there are more calls being proffered to Trinidad and Tobago as it pertains to the attacks on the Hindu community, in particular the temples. Now, Narmada, before we get into that, I want to congratulate you again on your birthday.
Thank you.
You're in the news today. So I just want to tell you happy birthday, and we are very grateful and thankful to have you, not just on the executive of the Compass Foundation, but also being a part of Critical Conversations.
Correct, and I think Narmada coming in as PRO, we are seeing her every week on the newspapers, writing, advocating, and I must say, happy birthday and a job well done.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be a part of the team.
And I really want to, big you up a little bit, because advocacy is very important. So the news they reported, they said more calls for protection of Hindu spaces, and they spoke about it. Of course, you put out a press release, so I don't know if you want to share with us on Critical Conversations a little bit about that.
Sure. I'll read a little bit from the article to give you all a brief summary. Another call is being made for the protection of sacred spaces and for people to embrace a future of inclusivity. The call is coming from the PRO of the Compass Foundation. After yet another act of vandalism at the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha Dabadi Mahavishnu Mandir on Masika Road was vandalized. This is the third such incident in Hindu sacred spaces in recent weeks, despite the assurance by the police to increase patrols in the lead-up to Diwali on November 12th. Caretakers discovered the Dabadi temple broken into on Monday morning, and its PA system, microphones, speaker boxes, gas tanks, an amplifier, and bottled water was also missing. It is believed the incident occurred between Sunday night and Monday morning. These acts are taking an emotional and physical toll on the community. It is indeed deeply disheartening to receive reports of yet another distressing incident of crime targeting a place of worship. This sacred sanctuary, which should serve as a haven for spiritual reflection and communal harmony, was callously violated when it fell victim to an act of sheer audacity and lawlessness. Ramjit Singh said that they will not be swayed by fear or intimidation, for it is only through a resolute stance against such spiteful deeds that we can reaffirm our commitment to justice, tolerance, and the principles of respect that underpin the fabric of our diverse society. She said these acts of disrespect and theft perpetrated against Hindu temples reverberate beyond the immediate victims, reaching into the very heart of societal values. Such occurrences not only inflict anguish upon the Hindu community, but also chip away at the bedrock of respect and tolerance that should be embraced by all in a multicultural and pluralistic society. We must refrain from trivializing these crimes as mere acts of petty theft, for such casual dismissal only serves to embolden those with ill intentions. That's a brief.
Yeah. No.
For me, I would just like to share, last week we spoke and we stood in solidarity with all those temples that were affected, but this particular one hit home because this is a temple I go to. I was once president at this temple, so I know the challenges that we face in even acquiring that PA system. For many years, the temple used a old PA system that, would cut off when the Kirtan group comes to sing and whatnot. And we understood the challenges in raising funds to get things like this, a new PA system, and to just see it taken away just like that. This one hit home for me. And I think we would continue to advocate for Hindu temples because we don't want to see this continuing.
But you know, there's a lot of conversation being had in the country right now. A lot about what we classify this as it's a blatant attack. I mean, when you look at I think it's over about 18, 16 number of attacks over a period of time. And then we're seeing persons, and as you rightly put it, trying to trivialize it. Yeah. What is your take in that? Just last week, we put out our statement. Of course, the politicians, they responded. The Mahasabha would have also responded to some of the positions taken. But here we're seeing another one, and a temple that you know about, and would have been a part in building it.
Well, I can tell you, there's no parking wars at the temple. There's no fighting for land at the temple. So what persons want to paint it something petty, I could tell you it's not something petty.
But stoning down people, that is what is that? Just normal violence in Trinidad. So people every day just get pelted down the road.
And you know,
I mean,
I interviewed the president, Sujit Kanhai, of that temple that was the stoning incident took place, and it was the 6th attack on the temple. Let me make that emphatically clear. It was the 6th attack on the temple.
Why are our leaders in Trinidad and Tobago? Because to me, it's almost as there's this sort of attempt to downplay the issue. What do they gain from downplaying the issue? Why would they want to do that? I'm just asking. If you were a politician and you are downplaying, why would you downplay it?
I would never do that. You need to stand with that community, whichever community being affected, and you have to at least reassure them, we are working, we are trying our best, not be like the Prime Minister and say, I fed up with crime.
But he knows. Oh gosh. But
After 8 years.
But what I loved about your article, Narmada, you said that, I can't remember the exact words, but the more it is downplayed, the more we take it for granted. It's acceptable then. We can just vandalize the temples, go steal from the temples, and I think that's the problem. Our leaders, we are downplaying it, and that's not right.
And I think they have a role in our society because, again, we speak about old politics and new politics. And when we speak about new politics, we have to hold our leaders to account regardless of where you fall on the political divide, that you have a responsibility in the things that you say to Trinidad and Tobago. Because here's the thing, the fact is, not everyone is going to be so much invested in the news to be aware of what is going on, and they may look to their political leader to put out a statement, or the Prime Minister to say something, and so you have a responsibility to these persons, and not to downplay it as though it is something that is just petty, and then to add insult to injury. The language, I think, this is my view, right? And we're all entitled to our opinions. I think it's insulting to tell somebody, if you believe that, then you are intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
That is an insult. I think that's a big insult to Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, the Prime Minister agreeing.
I want to be completely clear when we make this statement. We condemn all acts of religious intolerance that affects all religions that exist in Trinidad and Tobago.
And I want to say I have to thank you for saying that, because it appears in this conversation, if we do not say that, it is this group versus that group.
Yeah.
What is that about? We are a cosmopolitan, inclusive society, but we can have a conversation on an isolated event. That doesn't mean we like this group more than the other one, or we're trying to incite violence with this group versus it. Have none of that, So
But you know, when our leaders make these statements, it gives us the impression, even with the Hindu community, just leave the Hindu community alone. Let them fight. Is a land dispute
Yeah.
or parking wars. Let them fight.
yeah,
It's nothing
it's
serious.
just stones. It's just my program, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little stone. What do them? And that is the level of disrespect, and I think we need to be very careful because in a modern society, in Trinidad and Tobago, modern Trinidad and Tobago, what we say not only will have an impact, but it stays there very permanently.
Correct.
These things are being published in the papers, these things are being published in group chats, persons are consuming it, and then you have persons who are willing to support anything and everything because of a party jersey or a party color.
I saw something very interesting this week. I saw someone requesting statistics to clarify whether or not this constitutes as a hate crime. I think one is one too many in a country as tiny as Trinidad and Tobago.
And then they said, well, let the police do the investigation. So we need a police to investigate if it was hate or not because people getting stoned down. So we don't know. We don't know if it's, we need to ask the police.
How much it needs to reach for it to be
There's a threshold. We need to find a threshold. Have a threshold maybe? Possibly. We need to ask them. This is the critical conversations we would like to know from our leaders out there. What is the threshold? What is the threshold?
About 50?
About how many more would satisfy you to think that this is a hate crime or not? You let us know. You respond because they have a lot of time to write releases and say all sorts of nonsense on press conferences. So you let us know. It's a conversation we're having. But guys, I think we have a great attorney at law. I noticed that he appeared in several spaces at the Privy Council, and I think I want to get his opinion on some of these things.
Absolutely.
So not only we'll dive into the sedition matter when we come back, we're going to also ask him a little bit on
His view on these incidents.
So stay with us. Welcome back to Critical Conversations with the Campus Foundation. And so we are joined now by attorney at law, Kyle Taklal Singh. I know that this is not your first time on Critical Conversations. We have actually had you on before, but it's your first time in studio with us.
Live.
Yes, live.
Yes.
Now, we're coming out of this, before we get to the sedition matter, we would have noticed, and we discussed this, so I don't know if you got a chance to look at the show last week and the week before, and of course we have been in the papers, and there's a lot of discussion.
I'm a groupie.
You're a groupie? There's a lot of discussion surrounding attacks on the Hindu temples. Of course, we know about some, just to highlight a few things for the audience. There were persons who broke into a temple and they cooked beef. There was recently there was stoning of persons who were attending a temple. Of course, just recently, as we spoke about in segment 1, about the temple in Davidi, Mausika. There's a lot of discussion. We also noted that on your section 1 show, you discussed a little bit, but we want to bring it to the Critical Conversations audience a bit. Hate crime, not hate crime. What are your thoughts?
Well, my position is, and I've said it very clearly, and maybe it's in the lawyer in me, we look for evidence, we look for patterns, we look for even circumstantial evidence if necessary. It is very clear in my mind, and I think it should be clear in the mind of most reasonable people, that when you look at the characteristics and features of these incidents, these heinous incidents against Hindu places of worship and other places of worship, but I'm dealing with Hindu places of worship today, it seems to be very clear, uncontroverted, that these were crimes that were marked with hatred towards Hinduism, Hindu institutions, Hindu worshippers, and the religion itself. No one can tell me that the stoning of worshippers while doing a prayer was anything less than trying to disrupt the puja or the prayer that was happening at the time. No one can tell me that the destruction of the Ravan effigy before its time, because it's done on the last time, before its time was not to disrupt the Leela, the Ram Leela celebrations. When you enter a temple and, cook beef, plan to cook beef, I think it was Independent Senator Timor that raised that argument. It requires what in law we call premeditation. It was a premeditated act, animus, call it, mental culpability, to or what lawyers call mens rea, to go there and to deface and to desecrate a Hindu place of worship. That is classic hate crime. It is classic bigotry. That cannot be tolerated in our society, and you were making the point, which I fully agree with. Leaders have a role not to satisfy populism, not to say what people want to hear, and not to be, not to try to appease everybody. They must look at issues critically, and they must call out issues as they see it. This is a clear instance of hate crime. This is a clear instance where persons have targeted Hindus and Hindu places of worship. Why not say so? What is the reason for trying to couch that criticism in, kumbaya? Doesn't make sense to me.
Mr. Tuklasik, I have a question, right? Is there any legislation that entails hate crime in Trinidad and Tobago?
There is no specific hate crime legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's interesting that it actually overlaps with the sedition argument, the sedition discussion that we'll have. But there is no specific hate crime legislation. In other jurisdictions, you have legislation that would add on, you could have specific hate crime, or you could add on to offenses. So if there was an assault, you might be imprisoned or sentenced to 2 years. But if it had the feature of hate or racism or bigotry, a magistrate may be entitled to sentence you for longer because it carried that characteristics. And that's how some other jurisdictions have dealt with it. Now, there are some jurisdictions, I think, that have gone too far. Anything the police think is hate or bigotry or whatever, they will come search your house. I think that's too far. Unfortunately or fortunately, free speech and expression entails things being said that makes you uncomfortable. But being uncomfortable about something doesn't mean it's illegal. But when it comes to incidents like this, which clearly have things like, defacing property, damaging property, stealing, and desecrating places of worship, it is clear hate crime, clear bigotry, and it ought to be dealt with by our leadership, by leaders on both sides or all sides of the political.
We have
a few people now coming to the party.
This is one of the, I know that we discussed throughout the years political parties, but I think now is one of the most interesting times. So we have a lot of political parties that are out right now, which in my view could be because maybe they don't feel as though the political parties that exist right now completely satisfies them. But I want to ask you a question about popular opinion. You said that leaders putting on something based on it. Do you think that that's a popular opinion to downplay the issue, and that it's about tolerance and we love each other?
It's two things. I think there is political expediency. Politicians, and we had both the leader of the opposition and the prime minister making what I think is popular statement. Basically, this is a country where we all sit around the campfire and sing kumbaya and everything is good, and that these are petty thieves and whatever.
Like when Stuart Young said, what it was, he said, we live a good life.
We live a good life, yeah. Right. So, there is political expediency. The problem with that is that you don't actually deal with issues, and you have to deal with issues, and that's why I love the name of your show, Critical Conversations. You have to deal with issues, you have to speak about them, and you will feel discomforted sometimes. And when we come to religion and we come to race and we come to these difficult topics, people are going to get uncomfortable. But what we have to be is a tolerant society, an understanding society that can speak, debate, disagree, and walk away right after and still be okay.
When we have leaders calling persons intellectually lazy for calling out these incidents as hate crime, how do you view this?
Well, I think that's an unfortunate statement. Let me put it as high as that. That is an unfortunate statement. I think that in itself is a lazy analysis of the issue. You ought to try to appreciate and understand someone's point of view. If you disagree, then so be it. But say why you disagree. Simply attacking it and characterizing someone's point of view as intellectual lazy, as I said, lazy in itself. What was the purpose of that? There was absolutely no
It was out of time, man.
It was out of time, it was out of bounds. There was no merit in putting that into the discourse. Where leaders ought to have gone is, well, okay, we have this happening. How do we solve it? Do we think it's a serious enough problem to bring legislation to treat with hate crime or to treat with acts of desecration? Or do we simply say, look, let's deal with it because that's a legislative solution. You may have an administrative solution. You may put pressure on the police and defense force systems. I see the president calling out defense force extra reserves now. You may put political pressure on the administrative arm or the executive branch to deploy resources to these sites, these places of worship, as the police said that they are going to do. So clearly the police, for all the criticism that we could criticize the police, recognize, perhaps because of their years of experience and training in investigations, that they have an issue and that they were going to deploy more resources to these sites. Now, that is good. And obviously the narrative that took place before the statement by the leader of the opposition, the Prime Minister, led to that. So there was, in a democracy, that's how you get change. You use political pressure, you use free speech, you use expression to advocate and lobby for your cause, you get change. So here we were at the point, you had sufficient people come out, Compass Foundation put out a statement, mass out, and you got the police commissioner to say, I can't remember the chronology, but you got the commissioner to say, I am going to do this. And then all of that is defeated because you have two statements that say, well, it's not really a big problem, that's okay.
You speak a lot about freedom of speech, and we're going to get into that in a bit. But this issue in particular, we saw the term modern Trinidad and Tobago, right? So there's a need to emphasize that Trinidad and Tobago is modern. So we're modern, right?
Yeah.
We accept that, okay. Now, we look across at the US, so any sort of first world politics where there's a balance between taking a party position, but then also in holding your party to account in the conversation that you have internally.
Yes.
And so you see right now, I believe the Republicans have a lot of debates going on, right? Similarly, in modern Trinidad and Tobago, we should be able to have that same sort of debate.
Yeah.
How do we strike a balance between supporting your party, whether PNM, whether UNC, whoever, but also maybe disagreeing with the party? Like, how do we strike that balance? Because some persons may say, well, if you're PNM and I disagree with the Honorable Prime Minister, you're not PNM anymore, kick you out of the party. If you disagree with Mrs. Fasad Bisessa, you sell out, you're the biggest villain, everybody against her. So how do you strike a balance, have that productive conversation in any
it's a question, I think, for everybody individually and depending where you are. You wouldn't expect, let's say, an MP or a senator, if they disagree with a party position or policy, to come out in the media and say, I disagree, and so on and so. That would be a bit reckless. It would show a sort of disunity and calamity in the party, and people may not be attracted to an organization like that. I think if you're a supporter, I am a supporter of the United National Congress. I'm not an MP, I'm not a senator. I'm a supporter of United. I have not hid that. In fact, I've said that whole on newspapers, on my show, etc. But I'm happy to call them out or to say respectfully when I disagree with them. This is an issue I have a huge disagreement. It is not a minor disagreement that I think I should stay quiet. So it is sufficient enough for me to say what my views on it, what my views are. And in striking the balance, of course, keep your criticism, I think, constructive. There's no personal attack.
I agree.
And in every, this is a life lesson. Freedom of speech is important, but it's also how you say things. As long as you say it constructively and within certain parameters, which are hard to define. And that's why I always go on the side of free speech. Say what's on your mind. Obscenities, maybe not, right? But in your family, in your community, If there is an abuser in your family, what do? You stay quiet and let the abuse happen. You know, if you have a friend who's a drug addict or an alcoholic, what do? Let them throw their lives away? You have to say problems, and you have to tell people where there are problems. That's how I've lived my life. And I think it's important, if you're in an organization, if you see things that are happening, you need to say it. You need to say it.
See, this is why we talk about the difference between old politics and new politics. We want to have the conversation. We want to disagree.
Yeah.
Especially in modern Trinidad and
In
Tobago.
modern Trinidad, but I think the older politicians are afraid of different views.
And you know, it sort of holds true, because, and this is not me trying to be Hindu-centric or form a Hindu state or anything like that, but there have been very nasty attacks against Hinduism historically. We came from a place where we had to fight for the cremation, the right to cremate our dead, in the 1940s and 1950s. You came from a place where we were called the recalcitrant minority, Hindus and East Indians. Then you had cowsheds, the schools of the very Mahasabha. I mean, I heard that one person said that he don't know what the Mahasabha ever did for Hindus. I heard that was a comment. That had to be, the person had to be drunk to say that, right? You know, the Mahasabha came from a place where it developed schools, when there were no schools for young Hindu girls.
And where are they now?
And where are they now? They are the scholarship winners,
President medal
the
winners.
doctors, the lawyers, all of these people who have come from these schools.
Shanta, actually.
I always say I am so grateful to the SDFS and Mr. Sat Maharaj, because I was able to attend Mahasabha primary school and secondary school. I went to Lakshmi Girls, and look where I am today.
Yeah.
Dharma for life.
No, and I stand by, you protect your dharma, and your dharma will protect you.
That is the Sanatanist way, and it's important. As I said, those things have been said, and they still linger in our consciousness. Maybe because those who should have stood up at the time did not do it. And I think it's incumbent on our generation, when we see things. This is not about trying to separate or segment. If this happened to my Muslim brothers and sisters, I would also say it. And it has happened in some cases. And the Roman Catholics, whatever denomination you are, once there is bigotry, it is incumbent on every right-minded citizen to call it out and to say it. Once there is that type of an attack, you have to do it. That is your duty, not only as in Dharma or your religion or to God, it is your duty as a citizen to stop it. And if we don't stop it, then we end up in places that we don't want to be.
I appreciate his advocacy against all forms of bigotry. I appreciate that. Now we want to get to the sedition law ruling, right? Free speech impact in Trinidad and Tobago. Take us through the events. What happened? What went wrong?
So the origin that this started sometime in 2018, 2019. Mr. Sat Maharaj, being the buoyant character that we all knew him to be, made some very rugged commentary on issues in Tobago. He was essentially a secessionist. He felt that Trinidad should be separate from Tobago, and he made some rough comments. Some people held them to be inappropriate, and so be it. I have no difficulty if someone says that they didn't support that statement or whatever. Whatever happened after that, somehow the police decided that constituted sedition. Now, under our current Sedition Act, sedition could mean anything. It is a broad, vague type of section. It basically says that anything that causes disaffection and ill will to the government could have you being charged with sedition. You could spend 2 years imprisonment. In fact, the Sedition Act, believe it or not, outlaws certain forms of communism. So if you're a communist in Trinidad and Tobago, which nobody probably is, but there's nothing wrong with being a communist if you wanted to be, you could be charged. And that's how old the Sedition Act was, and that was the law. The police obtained warrants, raided the TV stations of Jagrati. They threatened to arrest Mr. Sat Maharaj.
Just to cut you across, who was the commissioner of police at
When
that
was
time?
this?
It was Mr. Griffith that was the commissioner of police at the time. I mean, while on that, I don't know, and I have no evidence to say that Mr. Griffith was directly involved in this. The way it usually works is that police officers, as a public officer, they exercise independent discretion. So no commissioner of police is supposed to pick up the phone and tell a policeman how to do the investigations. Investigations have to be done independently, regardless of who is the supervisor. I mean, the recommendations could be rejected going up a line, but that's a different issue. So police were basically threatening to arrest Mr. Satmaraj. We immediately, again knowing Mr. Maharaj, when a fight was in his face, he wanted to take it on. So Dinesh and I and Stefan heard that when he knew that this is what the police wanted to do, he wanted to say the statements again, right? Because he was also an advocate of free speech. And he said it very plainly that he wanted this matter resolved in court because he always felt in defense of Hinduism, in his case on Mahasabha, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, he wanted to take this fight up. This SDMS and Mr. Satmaraj were not strangers to court. They had the famous radio license case where they were discriminated against and were not given a radio license. He also dealt with the Trinity Cross case, meaning that at one point in time the only award was at Trinity Cross, and Hindus had to not accept it at some points because of that the symbol, right? So all of these cases, they were custom. We essentially decided that we would challenge the Sedition Act. We said, one, the Sedition Act was too vague and unknown to law and offended the rule of law. The rule of law, one of the principles of the rule of law is that laws must be certain. A citizen must look at a law and be able to understand what that law means. We also said that it contravened the constitutional right, or a section in the Constitution called Section 1. That's actually where we started our show, Section 1. Section 1 of the Constitution says that Trinidad and Tobago shall be a sovereign democratic state. An important feature of a sovereign democratic state is the right of every citizen to criticize their government. And we felt that sedition laws contravened that. We won at the High Court, we lost at the Court of Appeal, and then we went to the Privy Council. What the Privy Council held, it did not give us the constitutional relief that we asked for, because we asked that they strike the law completely. What the Privy Council said is, look, this law is old law, and when you come to old law, it's something that is called saved law, meaning that you can't constitutionally challenge law pre-1976, because your constitution only came into place in 1976. So what it said is, we're not going to interfere with law because it's saved law. But what we are going to do is say two things. We're going to say, one, insofar as somebody, you're alleging sedition, the words could only be seditious if you incite violence or disorder. And I give the example, well, I started giving the example. If we were to say today that all MPs are a waste of time and we should get rid of them, that could have been seditious. That could have been seditious. If we say now, but because of this ruling, in order for you to be seditious, you would actually have to say, all MPs are a waste of time, let's get rid of them. All of us, let's go down and gather outside the parliament, and as they come out, let's grab them and get rid of them. That type of speech is clearly encouraging, inciting violence. It is clearly causing public disorder. But simply saying, we need to get rid of them, that is not. Or simply saying they're a waste of time, they don't benefit the country, that is not. Now that may cause disaffection and ill will to the government. But what the Privy Council ruling has said is that you must now, in order to be seditious, the words must incite violence and incite disorder. And I think that is the important thing, and that has come out of the case. I think it is important, as lawyers, sometimes you will get a revolution in the law, and law moves very slow to the right direction. So this is a small victory for us going forward. There will be other free speech cases. I'm actually involved in a case. I got pulled into a case by some young lawyers where someone was denied the right to burn the police flag because they are dissatisfied with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And as a right of expression, they want to take the Trinidad and Tobago police flag and burn it, and the police deny them permission because they say that will cause disorder. And that is a case that we might be taking. But you've had famous flag burning cases in America, so there is jurisprudence on it. The point being that the law would have to now move incrementally towards more freedom of speech, in my view, and that is the way that we think we should argue it. So these are the benefits that I think came out of the sedition ruling.
So just to clarify, with this ruling now, if the same exact situation ought to happen, can the police prosecute?
They ought not to. They ought not to. Now, one of the features of the Sedition Act is that, unlike other laws, you need to have the express permission of the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, to launch a prosecution. And hopefully the DPP, who is supposed to be an independent officer, would look at it and say, well, there's no violence here, there's no public disorder. No. But one thing that the police can do, they can obtain warrants, because they can obtain a warrant by a regular justice of the peace. Unfortunately, we have a trend in this country, in my view, where justice of the peace, some justice of the peace, they grant warrants without much consideration. They work with the police show up and say, I need a warrant, and they go ahead and they find. I have been to court and I've quashed many warrants, meaning I've challenged the use of warrants and the granting of warrants, and I've been successful in those cases. One was Mr. Adrian Schoon, one of my clients. So the problem is that the police can still go and obtain warrants and harass you. But now, JPs should understand that unless the police come with evidence that the words or the words that are used that the police are saying is seditious incite violence or public disorder, they ought not to grant the warrant to seize anything.
So I agree. I think this is a victory, especially for free speech and us being able to hold anyone to account. I want to go back to something we were discussing, positions that persons take on different things. And even though we may criticize or oppose to what they are saying, are we in a way, now the question I'm asking, I disagree, but what I'm asking is, are we in a way trampling on their freedom of speech? Because there are some persons, if you disagree with them, they think as though you are not allowing free speech.
Well, that may be a view as well. I look at it, you had the famous English philosopher Stuart Mill, who said that, society ought to be a marketplace of ideas. Ideas, you have a marketplace, ideas must come, they must collide, they must clash. He also said that truth, you have a livelier impression of the truth when it collides with error. So when people put falsehoods or bad opinions out there, it is the task of right-thinking individuals to put the good ideas out there and to debunk them. And you don't want to suppress bad ideas. I want the bad ideas to come out so that I can debunk it. Because the problem with bad ideas and bad thought is that they fester and they find themselves in little echo chambers, and people who listen only not appreciate the error, and then they grow, and then what you have is bad ideas festering, growing like a cancer, and then all of a sudden it takes over society. You have a bad idea that is now popular, which has happened many times in history, in the history of mankind. It is better that I invite people, come with your bad ideas. I prefer that you come out and you say your bad ideas and thoughts so that I can correct it. In my view, what I think is correct. I may not be right all the time. And that is why I want to have discussion and debate with you.
So we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier on, we're seeing a number of small political parties. I don't want to say small, I retract that. We've seen a number of political parties evolving. We're also seeing a number of shows, Critical Conversations, Section 1, and a number of different shows out there. Advocacy and platform speaking, whether it's through social media, it has increased.
Yes.
Why do you think advocacy is so important for modern Trinidad and Tobago and development of country?
Well, it's the same. I think it's the same point. It's a diffusion of ideas. Now, in our political system, we spoke about many parties. In our political system, unfortunately, it's a first past the post system, and I think there is a fear in the population that if I decide I want to go with a third and fourth party, I may abandon the second party, and the first party, who I don't want in power, may win. So the second party is able to hold, I'm not calling names, but the second party is able to hold sway and allow you not to go to third and fourth parties because you're afraid that the other party you don't want to win stays in power. And that's, a political system that we operate in. But there should be nothing preventing persons from forming their own political parties, from advancing their own political causes, and when the time is right, maybe aligning wherever you have to. I don't see a problem with it.
We spoke about this almost on every show. The lowest voter turnout in the local government election, and if it was about 30% voter turnout.
Yeah.
What does that say for Trinidad and Tobago? How do you interpret that?
I mean, I am somewhat of an amateur economics reader. I read a lot of economics books, and I always think that the marketplace decides. And if your percentage is low, it means the product isn't good. So capital follows good products. If your product is bad, you're not going to have money chasing it.
Are these political parties doing a market analysis?
I don't know if they're doing a market analysis, but they're not good. Either one. I'm a supporter of the UN, so I could say it is obvious if your votes and your overall votes are dropping, that you are doing something wrong. And this is the age where people don't have to go to the corner on one night in a month, as I remember going to the first political meeting with my father, to listen to political ideas. You start scrolling on your phone, within 2 minutes you have everybody's view. So the ideas are out there. People can decide, they can choose, and voting is much easier than it's ever been, and it will continue to be, because as technology goes on. The problem is that people are just politically disengaged and disinterested. Now that could be psychologically for different reasons. It may be that our attention span is no longer focused on politics of the day. That's why they say that the younger people tend to stay away from the politics.
Well, no one's speaking to us, to be quite
that's
honest.
The point. That's the
I think when I listen on, I hear 1 or 2 MPs that speak a language that I want to hear.
Yeah.
Like I hear the MP Anita Haynes. She was a senator when we did Youth Parliament. She was one of the judges by the way when we did it. I listened to MP Parry, and I also hear some other MPs, also independent senators as well.
Yes.
Some of the senators on the opposition bench as well.
Yeah.
But it's just 1 or 2, or maybe 3 or 4. But collectively, the entire packaging of the message, I don't think it's reaching us. I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
But what I'm also seeing.
Well, 2 things. I like that you're including me in the us. So that's good.
No, because that youth vote,
Yeah.
I believe it is a huge
Catchment.
there. But we're seeing a lot of PR spin.
Yeah.
Spinning this in all kind of ways, spin until they get dizzy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To say, well, we win.
Yeah.
Or we almost win.
Yeah.
Or we are on good footing.
But that's another thing. If you delude yourself, you're never going to solve the problem. If you delude yourself, you're not going to solve the problem. And if your votes keep dropping, it's no comfort to say, well, my vote has dropped to a lesser degree than the other party. Right? That doesn't help you. You have to decide why your base or the persons who voted for you are diminishing. You have to find out why, you have to investigate, and then you have to implement things and strategies to not lose votes. I mean, I would think that's basic logic.
But here's the thing though. I think, this is just my opinion again, right? We being independent in our opinion here on the show. I think both political parties, they know what the issue may be, but I think there's some persons around the issue or the issues, and they benefit from it being like that. They benefit from the chaos. They benefit from that type of environment, because you know why? They become an MP.
Yeah.
They get a second term. What is it? After a second term, I think you get a full
Pension.
amount, a pension. So there are persons who benefit from this, whilst the rest of Trinidad and Tobago either migrating, brain drain, or not gonna vote for you.
Yeah.
And then you have some who really seeing very, very hard times while you sit down there and parade around yourself.
Well, I suppose it goes to the intention of why you join politics and why you pick up social issues. There's a famous book by George Orwell. It's not The Animal Farm that everybody knows. It's called Road to Wigan Pier. One of the things he talks about that, he says, he looks at the middle class England in the 1970s, 80s, and he says, the middle class England is obsessed with helping the lower classes. And when he gets into the analysis, it isn't because they want to actually help the lower classes, the person who work in coal mines, etc. It's because they are envious of the higher classes and the rich. And therefore you pick up this cause as a sort of social badge, that I am in politics, I am there, I'm helping. It's not because you actually want to help. It's because you have your own personal agenda and your own personal hatred to advance in the political sphere. And it may be the case that there are some people in our politics who have entered the politics for that. Now, the way you deal with that in a democracy, the way you deal with that is that each, in mature democracies, like America or even Britain, you have gatekeepers in the political party. They don't let in labels in. I want to use a different word here. But you don't let people who aren't fit to be in politics into the political arena. You leave them at the sphere, right? You leave them on the side. But they stand guard of their political institutions. A political party that isn't legislated. But you have people in a strong institution that stand there and say, that person he can support, but he ought not to get in to the face of the party, because we have to preserve our intellectual aura, our dignity, our ethics. We need to preserve these things, and we stand guard to ensure that our political party is preserved from that and protected. That is in a mature political system. It may not happen here.
You say you support the United National Congress. Does any of this committee also exist within that political party?
I'm not in the structure of the United National Congress. I hold no position in the party. I have no position at all. I'm a member, a regular card carrier.
They need to give you a position.
I am a regular card carrying member. But with that, I have the freedom to say what I want.
But there's something I wanna get to before we wrap up. As I spoke about persons benefiting from the chaos, I mean, whilst they benefit from this chaotic environment, right? Some of them, we're talking plain politics here. Both parties, all parties, there's political baggage involved, right? And it seems as though loyalty is the primary objective over competence.
It's the currency.
It's the currency.
Currency of advancement. In politics, you learn that the currency of advancement in some political institutions is loyalty as opposed to competence.
Sacrificing.
Well, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm also not saying it's entirely wrong, because a political party can't be, what we call champagne socialism. You can't sit here and drink glasses of champagne and pontificate. That isn't politics. You have to have people on the ground. You have to have people who deal with people, and you have to have the loyalists. Japan's army had kamikaze, right? They would crash a plane because you tell them to do it. And that is how it works sometimes. You need that type of loyalty. But it certainly can't be a mainstay. It certainly can't be what the party is built around. There has to be room for the competent people to come forward, who will attract other competent people. And before you know it, you have a strong party of national unity and national unity. You have a strong party of national unity that can present a face to the population that they would vote you in.
Are you saying the incompetence or the loyalty is driving away young persons, the young professionals?
I want to ask Chris that question.
I think so. I am graduating next week, by the way.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I spent a number of years at the university level, because I did obviously my diploma and now my bachelor's. And when you have discussions, you are doing your masters at UWI, young professionals, they don't want to hear about this.
Yeah.
They think it's just, this is not seditious, mad people talking.
I've had the experience, because I have had chambers and I have mainly young lawyers who work with me. They're in the early 20s, early 30s, late 20s. And to get them to come to do, like I would do UNC legal aid many times. The party would ask me, I'd gang up a group of lawyers and say, let's go down and in a constituency and see people and give
You could be a legal advisor.
Yes, no. And the problem with that is that the young lawyers, they would come because I asked them. But they aren't going to come because they want to assist the party or help the party, or or they're fanatic about the party. And it's strange, because that's not the way I came into the party. When I came into the party, I wanted to do anything the party asked me for. If I had to hold a flag, I wanted to do it, right? If I had to carry water, I would do it. But you just wanted to be a part of the movement.
Well, it was a movement.
It was a movement. You wanted to be a part of the movement. Now, I think that,
It's performative. Most of it seems performative. But we're running out of time. So any last closing statements you want to leave with our audience?
No, I mean, well, thanks for having me, of course, and thanks to you, and I think you all are doing excellent work. Keep it up. it certainly is in the vein of free speech, and it is certainly something that the country needs. We need to speak about issues dispassionately and without fear, and have your views tested. I may be very wrong, and I'm happy if someone tells me I'm very wrong. I'll invite you on my show to come and tell me I'm wrong. And that's what us modern society is about. That is what sedition law prevented, and I'm happy that there's been some change in that. And to link into the other topic, I think it's important when things are wrong that we call them out, and we call them out strongly.
So guys, you all heard it here. When things are wrong, you want to call it out strongly. And I believe attorney at law, Mr. Taklas, and he's inviting us. Come on his show, have a discussion with him. So we want to thank you for joining us on Critical Conversations. I think this was one of our more vibrant, exciting conversations. You know, we're back in the studio, and well, not back. We are now in a studio. And so last week we had Emily King. She was amazing, and of course we had you. So very grateful. And you know, coming off of that Zoom experience, so it's a bit more personal being able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So we'll be back with more. Welcome back to Critical Conversations with the Compass Foundation. I think, guys, we had a very interesting conversation. Again, happy birthday, Narmada. You wanna really? Yeah. And you look very nice. Is this your birthday green? This is your birthday green. And of course, we had attorney at law, one of the younger, brilliant, popular lawyers that we're seeing taking the media by storm. I mean, the number of cases that he's involved in, and of course this being, as he described, a victory. So we want to thank him for joining us on Critical Conversations. And well, guys, we want to see you all again next week, same time, same place. This has been Critical Conversations.
Bye.